Good evening and welcome to the Monday, October 23rd, Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. City Manager Coleman, would you like to do the roll call for us, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Villavicencio.
Here.
Councilmember Cave.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Present.
Councilmember Juneman. Mayor Abrams.
I'm here as well. Council members, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Lee, seconded by Cave, the motion to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We have no unfinished business tonight. We have some new business. Our first agenda item is an update on new technology. And Mr. Folds or Mr. Rube, who is going to go first?
Mr. Rube.
Are we going to talk about what we're buying or what we, or the money? We've already purchased it, that's right. We've already purchased it.
Hopefully it
So,
looks pretty.
but it's great to learn about it.
Good evening, Council. Tonight I'm going to start off with discussing the financial software that Council originally authorized the approval back in August of 2022 to purchase. Just quick background information. Our old system is Eden Systems. We had that for 22 years. It's inefficient. It's old. They're not doing any upgrades to it or any enhancements. So we had to look at something going forward. So one of the no-brainers was to go with Enterprise ERP. We did look at a couple other options, but this was the upgrade within the Tyler Technology product, which made it easier for the overall transition. Eden Systems was hosted on the city servers. However, the new system, Enterprise ERP, is a cloud-based, web-based system, so it makes it easier for staff to access. Just to give you an idea of what the old system looked like, this is the main hub of Eden Systems. It's a very small font. Everybody has to squint to basically see it. So it was not very user-friendly. Again, very old technology. Now, our new system is bright, beautiful, and full of colors. It's fully customizable. This is what the main hub would look like of our live database. Staff is able to customize their favorites, and we're able to, as administrators, both IT and finance, able to customize everybody's pages so they have the same options, but then they can customize as well, including the colors and the layouts. So each section, you can see different colors, different headers. They can change that to what's better for them, something a little bit more eye-catching for them so they know what to look for as they go through it. So today I wanted to touch a little bit on accounts payable because that's one of our most improved processes that hits citywide. So this next screen shows the screen that employees will see as they enter in accounts payable invoices to be paid. There's a series of different boxes and information that they have to enter in here. A lot of it's required, some of it's not, including the vendor name, the dollar amount, invoice number. They have to attach an attachment of an invoice to make sure that is a legitimate purchase so it can be reviewed. To give you an idea, I'm big on visual aids, so I brought a couple with me. Our previous process is we'd get the paper invoice from a vendor. We would attach a payment authorization form internally. So we get the invoice, and this is several invoices, attach a payment authorization form. This one was processed by one employee, sent to another, the supervisor, department head to sign off, and then goes to finance for approval and review. So from there, we process the invoice, print off another piece of paper, attach this to it, and then scan it into the system. Not very efficient, so we needed to look for something different, and that's what we have done. We're eliminating a lot of this paper, and I'll give you even some more fun facts in a little bit about that. So with the approval process, when an employee submits an invoice, if it's under a certain threshold, it goes right to finance for approval. If it is a higher threshold, it goes to the department head, and if even higher, it gets approval from the city manager. So there are several systems and workflows set up, so it automatically goes through this automated system. So when a supervisor goes in, or even finance goes in to their main hub, on this screen you'll see that the number 5 is highlighted. There's 5 approvals that are required. Once you go into that, you can see at a glance of what's needing approval. The very top one is API, accounts payable invoice. There's a little paperclip next to it indicating that there is an attachment of an invoice, so they know that at least the beginning steps have been done. And then on the far right side, I have circled in red the little arrow with the box. That's where supervisors, the finance department can dig in a little bit further to see what information was submitted. Once you go into that section, you're able to see all the information the employee entered into the system. Finance and department heads, city manager will be able to approve all purchases based off of the vendor, the dollar amount, the account code description, and tie it back to at the very top where the extra circle at the very top is where the attachment is. That attachment, they'll be able to pull up in real time an image of the invoice and be able to tie back all that information to make sure it is a legitimate purchase. After that whole process, it's nothing too crazy exciting. It's just a complete workflow from there. So moving on to the next feature, that is a pretty neat feature. This one is the budget monitoring page that all staff that have access to Enterprise ERP will have be able to access. With this, depending on what their departments are, they'll be able to see all the different account codes, and this one is currently sorted by fund. They'll be able to drill in. Anywhere that it has blue lettering or numbering is a hyperlink. They'll be able to drill down, so that red circle is circling the charitable gambling fund 205. You'll be able to see what the budget is, what's spent, and what's available. Off to the side, there's some graphs that quickly display some of that information. So it makes it a lot easier for department heads to follow along with their budget, whereas now there's a lot more steps going on that they have to do to check it out. So as I mentioned, these pages are all customizable. This slide shows 193 cards. Well, it shows 6, but there's 193 different cards that they can access to give them information. So they can take what's going to be most beneficial for them and put it onto their site. So the top left corner is 100,000 K vendors. So this is going to pull up and list out any vendor that's been paid over $100,000. They'd be able to then quickly see who those vendors are, what the purchases are, and then go back to the detailed information to make sure that if they do have a question on it, if Public Works it wasn't expecting a $300,000 payment going out, they can quickly look to see what it was. It's generally streets. So it's a great feature. There's, like I said, 193 different cards they can pick from. There are 95 pages that they can do that is already preset and customized, so I'll show you that next one. This is account monitoring. This one is also set up by fund. I just used the charitable gambling fund as an example, but you can kind of see here on all the different areas that you can kind of customize it, and you can see off to the right-hand side the spending versus budget trends. You'll be able to look at a 4-year. It does not have 2023 actuals in. We wanted to make sure the system was up and running before we started importing all those actuals. And then 2024 budget hasn't been placed in there either. So, but it's great. Staff's going to be able to look at their information, their budgets a lot quicker, pull up that information. Right now, if they do have a question, they go out to our current system, Eden Systems. They have to figure out, if they can, how it was paid, whether through accounts payable or through a Visa purchasing card. And we'd have to go out to a separate storage online or electronic storage location to pull that detail. So this is nice. It's all at their fingertips, and like I said, it's web-based. This project with the new ERP system ties back to the city's strategic plan in 3 different areas. Environmental stewardship. We are saving the environment by printing less. There's quite a bit less waste. For financial and asset management, we're getting a new, more efficient software system, which will ultimately save staff time. And then operational effectiveness, improve our best practices within the city to make sure we're doing it the best of our abilities, as well as improving efficiencies across the board. So my fun facts that I wanted to share with you. Accounts payable, as you can see, for 2022, our invoices processed were 2,468 invoices. As I showed you here, we have a cover sheet plus the invoice. So we're going to be saving thousands and thousands. And there are some invoices that are 30, 40 pages long. So that's quite a bit that we don't have to have printed off. We can just keep electronic. Printed checks in 2022, 1,311. And then EFT payments, 552 in 2022. We are trying to get our vendors to move more towards electronic payments. It's just easier than printing off checks. It saves staff time, and then there's less to mail. Fortunately, our current process with EFT payments, we still print out a voucher form that shows them the information that they can receipt that wire payment. Our new system gives us the opportunity to email that information directly to them in an automated system, so we don't have to print anything out, stuff envelopes, and postage. So all around financial, time, environmental savings is huge. We're currently transitioning our accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing cards, cash receipts, general ledger, and budget. One other thing I wanted with my visual aids to show you, when it comes to Visa statements, because that's one of the big areas that we're going to be saving as well, this is 2 credit card statements. So this is about a month worth of paperwork that we will be able to save going forward. And this is with about 15 to 20 of our staff currently already do it electronic. So we're saving even a lot more. And then for accounts payable, these are 2 check runs. We do 52 check runs a year. So that's quite a bit of paper. And like I said, I like the visual aspect of it. So I didn't want to bring all 52 of these binders today because it's cold in here, but I'd be way too hot carrying that around. And then finally, what's next for our our software system is the payroll module and our HR module. Currently, we're working on that jointly between payroll and HR, and that should be up and running in July of 2024. And then we are constantly working on additional electronic workflows, setting up processes just to make sure that we can eliminate paper. A lot of these processes that are on paper are coming from different buildings. Somebody has to deliver them to City Hall, disperse around City Hall. It's a waste of time, energy, resources. We'll be able to streamline that quite a bit going forward. So with that, the only other thing is I'd like to commend the staff from the finance department, IT department. They've done a phenomenal job. We've been working really hard to get this up and running over the last 12 months. We have 2 new employees in the finance department, Carl and Lauren, are the assistant, and then accounts payable technician. They've been with us for under 12 months, and to learn an old system and a new system and help integrate it, they've been huge. They've been a great part of it. But with the help of IT, we've been able to streamline so many of these processes, and we keep on looking at new processes to build off of. So with that, that's all I have for the financial software.
Thank you. Mr. Folds.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, good afternoon. Thank you. Joe, again, I just want to say thank you. It has been a lot of fun to work with your staff on this. And I think most of the things that I'm going to touch on, actually, all the things that I'm going to touch on are not necessarily tools that we use to be more efficient. It's staff getting creative in how they use either existing tools or new tools. It doesn't benefit me necessarily to be able to inspect a property out in the field and have access to data, but it does greatly those individuals that use that. And so while we generally assist in that, it takes the staff kind of being willing to learn and try something new to do that, and we're seeing more and more of that. It's making it a lot of fun to work in the city right now in IT. So I'm going to touch on a couple of items. One is on Acela. You've heard us talk about Acela quite a bit. Usually it's in the strategic plan. There's some goals there. We also have to take the payment to you every year. So Acela is a product that we've used since 2020. We use it predominantly to manage code enforcement, building, planning, public works, and license records. We've been using it and processing all of those in the background, in the back office, since 2020. Over the course of the last year, we've really ramped up the citizen access component of that, what Acela calls Acela Citizen Access, or ACA. The ACA site that came canned, if you will, or the built-in public portal. When we first got it, was very cumbersome. There was a lot of scrolling. It was not very intuitive, even finding the information what you're looking for. The first thing I wanted to highlight is staff worked with a partner to redesign it to what you're looking at here. There's no scrolling involved at all. It's one page. It is responsive to mobile devices, so it will reshift the text and is user friendly from a mobile device. But as you can see, it's much, I wish I had an image of the old one because it's night and day. Maybe try and find that. But it's all summarized in one easy to read page. The login is very front and center, and we've heard very good response from some of the 1,500 users that have registered for Citizen Access. Over the last year, again, we've gone live with over 50 records now in Acela Citizen Access. So there's 50 records available for citizens to start the process, predominantly in the licensing module, but we also have a number of planning records that can the process be started online now as well. We have rental property application, worked with Reagan Baggs, and when we talk about staff and the success stories or the success of an application, it really takes staff to dig in and want it to succeed. We've seen it with Joe and his staff and the ERP implementation. We see it with the licensing, the rental property license specifically, and the amount of time that Reagan has dug into that. So she's processed now, or the division has processed over 1,300 rental licenses. They're now through the process of some of the initial licenses being issued, so they're renewing them online. So she's having over 400 of them have been processed online. On the business licenses side of things, Andrea Sint and her staff have processed over 1,000 annual licenses. So again, it's annual license. They're now through renewing all of those 1,000 licenses and doing so through the Citizen Portal. They've also issued over 100 temporary permits using Acela and the Citizen Portal. I already mentioned we have over 1,500 users that are registered for it, so that could be homeowners, business user or business owners, contractors. Some of the feedback that staff have heard, because again, that doesn't necessarily come to me, but what Reagan has heard, what Andrea has heard from some of the applicants is that they appreciate the automated communication. So hey, you have a license coming due, you should begin this renewal process. Oh, and here's a link that you can click on to start that. You have a payment due, here's a link where you can click on that and make payment. They're also enjoying just the 24/7 access. We've heard that some of them are working all day long and they enjoy being able to get home. Maybe they're missing a piece of information for a license. They can upload it at their time, 24/7. It's available for staff in the morning when we get in. So really making the city counter, if you will, community development counter, public works counter, not just 8 to 4:30, but 24/7 in some regards. Next piece of Acela that we've been using over the last year, the building inspectors and our neighborhood preservation specialists are using Acela Mobile in the field. And so it's an iOS app that they can use on their iPads and iPhones. It's basically allows them to log in and manage the records that they need to manage. And so whether that's completing an inspection and approving it or denying it, they're able to take pictures, upload it to the record, all from out in the field. It also has a nice little map where you can see all of the inspections that are assigned to them in a given period of time, and then where they're located within the city. And we've had good feedback from the staff using that as well. Switching gears to another application, you've heard us, maybe me, talk about Laserfiche over the years. We've used Laserfiche in the city for probably over 20 years. We've started it, it was our permanent document repository, and so you'd have all of that physical paper, we'd scan it in, and we'd store it in Laserfiche and be able to assign certain retention policies to it. 3 or 4 years ago, we came out with some additional tools and realized that, well, if no one's creating more paper and they're scanning it all, what do we need to do as a product to make ourselves more useful? And they added a forms and workflow component of it. So it's somewhat mirrors some of the capabilities that Joe is going to be able to use in his new application, but in lieu of having an application to do that, we can use and have used forms combined with workflows to take a paper form, create a digital form of it, and then based on the information entered into that, apply as complex a workflow as we want to it. So a lot of it, we started with HR initially, and so we met with them and bring your paper forms, and let's pick off an easy one. So in its simplest terms, it's maybe a training request or training approval, and the workflow is a supervisor just approves it. And then that training request automatically gets routed to an employee file or any other number of locations, to some pretty complex workflows involving police field training officers. They have a form built out, and so they fill out their daily log sheets using this Laserfiche form. Workflow takes it, based on the ratings on it, can kick it back. They can upload it to or forward it to a supervisor if they need to see it, and then ultimately gets routed into a personnel policy as well, personnel file as well. So we started with 1, 2, kind of played around with it, and kept kind of trying to get staff to see the benefit of it. HR was a great advocate for us, and where we started 1, 2, 3 forms, we're now up to 60 processes that have been taken from your old paper to forms and workflow. So we're pretty excited about that. Axon is another company that we partner with or that we utilize that you've heard us talk about most recently with the fleet implementation, fleet and LPR implementation. So we also use them for the body cam. What those two hardwares do, though, is they create a large amount of data, a large amount of files. Not having an application to manage that amount of data can be extremely cumbersome. Axon's solution to that is evidence.com, and so that's the application we use to manage all of that. I want to highlight some of the work that the record staff has done here. A couple years ago, they started playing around with cases. And so what they're able to do now and have quite successfully started using over the last year is we've created relationships with our attorneys, county attorney, city attorneys, within evidence.com. And so historically, if we had digital evidence that we needed to share as part of a case, we take that digital evidence, we copy it to a pen drive. We copy that 3 times because it needs to go out to all the investigators, send those out via courier, via CSO to drive it down. 2 days later, we get new evidence. We have to create new data or new copies of that, forward it out. Records worked with the attorneys to get them to sign up for evidence.com. Evidence.com or Axon provides that free of charge to attorneys so that they have, Ramsey County attorneys, our city attorneys have their own Axon account. They're created as a partner agency to the city of Maplewood. So we can then share digitally those cases and all the evidence that's included in it digitally, automatically with whichever partner agencies we want. So no more driving around. They have all of it real time. It's been a huge win for records. And again, it doesn't impact me, but I hear their comments and how happy they are to no longer need to do any of that, and it's been very successful. We also utilize auto tagging, which is a utility that we've had since we started with body cameras, but is again very relevant right now with the fleet, just with the sheer amount of videos. I ran a quick report from the start of this year. We've processed over 50,000 videos of varying lengths into evidence.com from either body-worn cameras or a fleet system. Auto tagging, where we set up a reference essentially where evidence.com and the piece of evidence looks at the officer information that uploaded it and the date and time, compares that with Ramsey County CAD data and says, oh, that's case number this, that's this type of case. And based on that information, some of that information is then copied directly into our evidence.com environment. So the officers no longer need to go in and data entry at the end of their shift, all the case information, assign it a category. That's done for them, and they can spend their time much more quickly just confirming that it's all accurate. I know that's working really well because there's a couple times that they like it. Because when it doesn't work, I hear about it right away. Lastly, I wanted to touch on just Office 365 and some of our usage of Office 365. Again, subscription-based service for some of our Microsoft products and licenses. We've used it for a long time. You've heard it exchange online, so it's our email system. We used it early on for SharePoint, but for our city intranet, using SharePoint Online. Then there's all of Outlook and Word and Excel and all of the applications that we normally associate with Office. There's also this other subset of lesser-known tools that we've gotten some use out of lately and that we're really trying to promote within the city. One not so small or little known anymore, Teams is pretty prevalent now. When we first started using it, it wasn't. What we've really cemented, I think, in Maplewood is that it wasn't just a pandemic era tool to help us get through it. We now have 75% of staff that actively or have actively used it within the last 30 days. Since the beginning of the year, our staff has held over 600 meetings. And so again, I see that, almost on a daily basis. In-person meetings is still very important, and we have plenty of them, but there's a number of them where a 15, 20-minute call between Chief Schroeder and Chief Mondor and myself, that we can hop on a call and spend less time in the meeting than actually drive time, travel time back and forth for one of us. So staff is obviously using that quite a bit. We've had over 600 meetings since the beginning of the year. From a support standpoint, we use this all the time, but obviously staff are as well, just one-on-one video calls. So instead of calling, our phones have cameras on them as well, but we're really seeing people call them using Teams with video because you never know what's going to come up in a conversation. I need to share my screen. Hey, can you take a look at this? Hey, let's look at that contract together and just review it, read through it together. So the collaboration component of it, we're really seeing a lot of usage in the city as well. Stream is another little small tool I had never even heard of until a couple of years ago, and just briefly think of it as a private YouTube capabilities for us. It allows us to create screen shares, video recordings. We use it quite a bit for tutorials and just tips and tricks. We can record videos, upload them, and staff can use them. We've talked about it most recently with the Acela staff, the Acela team, creating not just a PDF of a tutorial on how to register as a contractor within Acela Citizen Access. Here's a video, watch 60-second video and actually see what you'll go through and what you can expect. Just the power of video, and we'll be rolling that out with staff as well. Lastly, a tool I want to touch on, bookings. It allows us all, with our licenses, to create basically an online scheduling or booking page. We used it early on in the pandemic. We created a bookings page where staff could go on and register for COVID tests. And then the EMS staff, there was 3 or 4 of them, could manage those appointments on the back end. More recently, we had Matt Young, who's our neighborhood preservation specialist again, and I maybe it's around, yeah, close enough. But also does a lot of the rental housing inspections. And so he had approached us in looking for an easier way to schedule and manage those appointments, because he would spend enough time and they'd find a time that would work for the landlord, only to find out that then the tenant, it wouldn't work for them or whatnot. So he was spending a ton of time going back and forth. He created himself a bookings page. So the process now is when a property needs an inspection, he sends them this link, schedule some time with me, whatever works for you and your tenant, and I'll be there. And so he sends them this link. They select what type of inspection they need. They enter the address, some key information. They see the times that are available according to that Matt can set himself. If he's on vacation, he doesn't show any dates, so he doesn't have to manage multiple calendars. And according to him, it's been an absolute game changer. It's both for himself, but also for the people that we serve. What's up next? So we have a couple of projects that we're working on. We're working with the fire department on an application called First Due. This is another hosted application that they've signed on for. The fire department performs what's called pre-plans, and so they'll go out proactively to a number of buildings, I believe commercial buildings predominantly, but does and collects a number of data at that site. So in the event of an emergency, they know where the water hookups are. They know if there's any hazardous materials there. before they've ever responded. They have that information going into it. So they sign up for First Due, and so we're in the process of implementing that. I believe we'll go live with that probably within the next 2 months if everything goes well. We're also working with them. They're exploring and have a test case for using body-worn cameras in the fire department as well. I think initially they'll use them for fire investigations and fire inspections. So if they get called for an arson investigation, they would go on site, wear the body camera, and have actual video footage of it all for investigative purposes. And lastly, yes, we're looking at AI and different ways that we can use AI in local government to become more efficient. We do have some staff and some logins that we've played around with ChatGPT a little bit. Microsoft recently has come out with Copilot is what they're calling it, but it's basically AI within our secure environment. And so we're able to use a lot of the different tools that we've kind of played around with ChatGPT, but against our internal private data using Copilot. So thank you. I know that's a lot of information. The one thing that I had told Melinda when I was putting these slides together is that I can certainly do, we get a lot of these little stories every week, I feel like, of someone doing something, well, that's pretty neat. You shouldn't have to wait for a workshop to hear some of that, and so I've committed to Melinda, and I'm committing to you now to do a better job of just highlighting some of those success stories that staff are using technology in the FYI, or at least letting you know about it somehow. So, but thank you very much. I do also believe that Joe and I talked about it before. That's a lot of information. If anybody is interested in taking a deeper dive on any one particular application or use case, we're more than happy to do so, on a one-on-one basis as well. So,
I want to thank both of you for this really impressive presentation. I remember when I first came on the council back in 2014, we were talking about, it's time to, we really need to work on our website. And, looking at what you brought to us tonight, all of these different types of applications and different types of programs and ways that our staff can be more efficient. I think it's absolutely fabulous. I am particularly interested in all of those applications where our community, where our residents and our businesses can communicate with us in a much more efficient and effective way. Maybe one thing that I would like to see is I'd like to see maybe a workshop where maybe you can do a demonstration of all of the different ways that people can communicate with the city, so that we have all of that, that we can certainly look at that and learn more about that. But very impressive. I really appreciate all the hard work and saving all of those trees. That is very impressive. It's got to make work much more, I want to say, enjoyable, more efficient, and certainly, I think, more dynamic as a city. So thank you very much for that. Council members, does anyone else have any comments, anything you'd like to say? Thank you very much.
thank you, everyone.
Moving on, we have one other agenda item. This is the Century Avenue Planning and Environmental Linkages update. Mr. Love, this is your topic.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. So, as you mentioned, MnDOT is conducting a study on Century Avenue. It's generally between I-94 and I-694. Tonight, we have joining us Ryan and Travis from the project team. They'll be providing the council an update on the study. They'll also be looking for feedback from the council, as well as be available for any questions. So I will let them start introducing themselves as I pull up their PowerPoint for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Good evening. My name is Ryan Coddington. I'm the MnDOT project manager on this study, and Travis is with me tonight. So
My name is Travis Weber with WSB. We're the consultant team working on the project.
So we're going to kind of tag team this presentation. So we'll get it up here, Steve. All right. So the big button. Okay. All right. So a few years back, I was asked to start looking at this stretch of road from 94 up to 694. It's kind of in orange there. Our intent in the project was really the pavement needed to be replaced, and we were starting to look at just our standard pavement replacement. It got pretty clear pretty quick that it needs more than that. And so since 2020, MnDOT has been looking at studying the road to identify potential solutions and what that road should look like in the future. So not news to anybody on the council. Here's kind of the existing look of 120. It's a 2-lane road with shoulders. It has residential and commercial accesses all along the corridor. With those accesses come postal and garbage service that is needed. So there's a lot of cars that kind of stop along 120 and make it a little harder to navigate. There's a railroad crossing on the north part, many signalized intersections. There's some schools, very constricted right-of-way, lots of utilities. As you can see from the picture, rural drainage, that just means that it drains down the ditches or tries to. And there's a lack of bike and pedestrian accommodations along the corridor. So with that, we've been doing a lot of stakeholder and continue to do a lot of stakeholder engagement for the project, both now and since we've started the study. We've had technical committee meetings with kind of the core project team. We've met with Met Transit. We had an initial public meeting to kind of kick off the study, really kind of hear from the residents on what they would like to see along the roadway. We've also had a series of elected official meetings with kind of a core group of legislatures along the corridor to kind of see how we can progress this project along. We've also talked internally with our geometrics office, the bike and ped office, and other ADA folks. So what are some of the kind of the key takeaways I wanted to mention from both phase 1 of the study and kind of our public engagement to date? Number one is safety for bike and pedestrians. A lot of what we've heard is people don't feel safe walking or biking along the roadway. Number 2 on there is there's kind of goes hand in hand. There's a lack of sidewalks or trails along the roadway. We also heard a lot about the congestion at the 120 and 36 intersection there itself. And a lot about vehicle safety and a lot of crashes that happen along the corridor. Pavement condition is not ideal. And there's a lack of ADA accommodations or improvements along the corridor. Also, folks have been really concerned with stormwater management and how is that treated or how is that not happening now with potential flooding in their area. Also, key consideration that we've heard a lot about is cost effectiveness or implementable solutions, right? We want to have something that can be accomplished, or we don't want to just have a study just to have a study. And then the last point down here is connected and automated vehicles infrastructure for the future. Basically, how do we make this corridor future-proof? How do we, like the technology presentation right before us, how do we make this for the new vehicles we're going to have on the corridor? So with that, with phase 1 really was how do we, what we determined is kind of our primary and our secondary needs. These are really things that any project would need to address. And we put those into a couple of buckets. So the primary needs are things that have to happen, and secondary needs are things that kind of come along with that. And so our primary needs on phase 1 of the study that came out of it was vehicle safety, congestion at the 120 and 36 intersection only, walking and biking along the corridor, pavement condition, and then our secondary need was congestion and accesses at other areas along the corridor where it backs up. And so with that, I will turn it over to Travis, who will talk kind of about where we're at with phase 2 of the study.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. So before diving into our alternative development, which is where we're at in the study, is really looking at, I'm going to go back to the primary and secondary needs here for a second, because we really wanted to encompass anything that was possible for this corridor and look at anything. And then we narrow that field looking at the primary and secondary needs. So if they don't fit in these windows here, if they don't improve vehicle safety, improve walking and biking, they're ruled out. And so as we move forward, the first one I want to touch on is that early on in this study, we looked at whether or not a 4 or 5 lane section would be needed. Like Ryan mentioned earlier, we've got very constricted right-of-way. It's very tight in a lot of areas. So, but if the traffic demanded it, we wanted to at least evaluate it. So one of the first things that we did was evaluate the traffic growth potential. We know what the traffic is out there today. We understand what COVID did to traffic in general, but really we looked at the projected traffic to see if it would meet the demands for more than a 3 or 2 lane section, as it were. And really what we found is because of the nature of the corridor, the fact that it's built out so much, we don't expect, or the studies didn't conclude that we would have extensive traffic growth. It'll be relatively stagnant, and so we quickly ruled out the need from a traffic standpoint of a 4 or 5 lane section. There's other reasons you may want it, but it wasn't the traffic demand that would draw that. And the other impact, because of the constricted right-of-way, is when you look at this map, the areas in red would have significant right-of-way impacts if we're going to go to a footprint that included a 4 or 5 lane section. So, and there really wasn't the desire, because there isn't the traffic demand, to look at rows and rows of homes or businesses that could potentially be heavily impacted or bought out because of that. So the group decided to eliminate that from further consideration. We'll be talking about the alternatives that move forward beyond that. And so, like I mentioned, we started with the universe of alternatives, everything that could be done. And, we went through what we call our level 1 screening process, looking at the type of typical sections. So those lane configurations, signals versus roundabouts. There's 14 different signals along this 6-mile stretch. The intersection at Highway 36, what improvements could be made there to relieve the congestion? And then bike and ped options. Currently, there are no sidewalks along this corridor. What can we do? What type of facilities do we need to look at to make sure we meet those needs? So the level 1 screening results, looking at all sorts of possibilities. I just kind of want to give a high-level overview of what we found. And what we found was there's a couple sections that kind of rose to the top as far as lane configurations. A 2-lane divided section, which would have a raised median in between, which would provide a lot of access control. And I'll dive into these in a little bit more detail. A 3-lane section. As far as signals versus roundabouts, we looked at that at the 14 primary intersections, whether or not those would function from a traffic standpoint. At this point, didn't look at any other sort of considerations, right-of-way constraints, access, anything like that. Our first level screening is just about, will it function? And both signals and roundabouts from the traffic standpoint will function. Those will move forward into the further consideration. At Highway 36, what we wanted to evaluate, obviously we're considering interchanges, grade separated interchanges at the 36 and 120. But we also wanted to see whether or not there was some sort of alternative intersection that we could do there for at grade, a less expensive option that would meet the safety and congestion needs. And what we found is that there weren't. And so because of the safety considerations, because of the congestion considerations, any sort of at-grade option for 36 is ruled out, and we'll only be looking at interchanges moving forward there. And then for bike and ped options, bike and ped was a significant need that we heard from the public, from stakeholders. And for this level of traffic, we've got about 10,000 vehicles per day on this road. There's really not a safe configuration that puts bikes on the roadway. Even with separated bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, we really need to move them off the roadway. And so moving forward, we'll be looking at least shared use path or bike lanes that accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists off the roadway behind the curbs. So those are at least the high-level screening results that we went through. I'll touch into some detail on kind of what's moving forward. The first one, this configuration that you see, is the 3-lane configuration, which has a lane in each direction, north and south, and a center left turn lane. This also includes shoulders on there. Ryan talked about the postal garbage access. We wanted to have room. In a lot of our meetings with our TAC group, we talked about that, and it was an important aspect to have as well, so that we could safely move around postal trucks, garbage trucks, things like that. You'll also see that there's a median and then the shared use path or sidewalk. For all of these, the configuration of what side might get a shared use path, what side might get a sidewalk, that's still up in the air. This really just sets, in general, a relative footprint. With the 3-lane section, that promotes the continued access. So at side streets, at driveways, you'd be able to make left ins, left outs. So operating, at least from an access standpoint, as it does today, but that center left turn lane gets vehicles out of the way as through traffic continues on. For the 2-lane with the raised median, it's a little bit different because that median promotes that access control. So at the side streets, at the driveways, vehicles will have to, if you're trying to make a left turn at this street, you would have to first drive south to a primary intersection, make the loop around. So a lot of redirection, but that's the trade-off for the safety benefits that come with right in, right outs and some of the access control. This again has a wide enough section with the shoulders for the garbage, for public safety to get around any stalled or stopped vehicles as well. So it accommodates the postal garbage service and emergency vehicles as well. Again, the same sort of configuration with a shared use path and a sidewalk on both sides. As it happens, both of those sections have the same footprint as it is now. So from a space consideration, they're identical, at least as they stand today. When we looked at the intersection, I mentioned there were 14 different intersections right now that are signalized. Those were evaluated at least at an initial level from a traffic standpoint. And what we'll be doing as we move on, because we found that roundabouts would operate, but we have to look, with the right-of-way considerations. Are there accesses that we need to maintain close by? Turn lane considerations for signals, different things like that, and a little bit further traffic operational analysis, as well as transit. Bus stop considerations, where they are, how they operate around roundabouts, how they operate around signals as well, are things that we'll be looking at further as we move on in this study. For the trunk highway, for the Highway 36 interchange, since we're eliminating the at-grade option, we're going to be looking a lot more in depth at several different interchange configurations. We'll be diving deep into the property impacts, further traffic evaluations, the perpetual connection to Margaret Street on the west side was an important aspect that we heard about. Impacts to the Gateway State Trail. There's a relatively new bridge there. What an interchange might do to that, how we can perpetuate the trail access. We'll be looking at whether or not Highway 36 goes over or under 120 as well. There's water table issues, different things to consider as well from an engineering standpoint. And then there is a small area plan that's going in the northeast side, I believe, that we need to see the pending results for, and whether or not we need to incorporate some of those findings into our study as well. And so for the grade separated interchanges, just at a very high level, some of the things that we'll be looking at: a diamond interchange, diamond with roundabouts, a single roundabout potentially, single point urban, diverging diamond. These aren't anything new. These are all used throughout the metro, but we'll just, at least at a very concept level, be looking at the traffic operations, the impacts of these, to see which ones rise to the top, or if some are eliminated from further consideration. So moving forward, we're going to continue with our elected officials meetings. Once we get done briefing all of the councils, the county as well, we'll come back to that group prior to our next public engagement meeting. And that's going to be providing a lot of this same level of detail. Maybe the alternatives will be refined a little bit as well, but hopefully have that in the next couple months before the end of the year, the public meeting. And then we move into the further level 2 screening analysis. So taking these alternatives, further refining them, seeing what the impacts are, what the benefits are, documenting the issues and impacts and all of those things, hopefully with the potential to narrow the alternatives so that we can really have something rise to the top, so that we can look for that funding and get a project going, in the not too distant future is our hope. So that concludes at least our portion of that presentation, but we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. We also brought big layouts. If there's interest in looking at it, we can roll those out, but wanted to at least brief you on where we're at with the study today.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question. Mm-hmm. The question is, I really appreciate the depth of the study and looking into all of these details. When might people expect to see that there will be some changes on 120, some physical changes? I'm talking a little bit further out than just, I know certainly your role in this, but.
Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time to see those changes happen. Where we're at with things is we have funding for basically a preservation type project. And so any of these added things, we really need to go out and find that funding. So it really comes down to a matter of funding and how how that kind of comes together. So if I put a timeline on it, it's probably in that 5 to 10 years, probably.
Okay. And how long will it take for your study to be completed?
So we're actively going, so probably summer we'll be done with the study. Is that accurate?
Yep.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but yeah, that's what we're looking at.
I think that's good for people who are watching and wanting to know, because I know that when you drive down 120, it looks like it's a 40-year-old road. It looks, because there's no curbs. It's it's just got a very different sense about it, and certainly with all of the interchanges and 120 and 36. That is a pinch point right there. Absolutely. So we appreciate it. Councilmember Villavicencio has something that she wanted to add too.
Sure. Thank you. I was just wondering what the date was on the open house.
I don't.
We haven't set that yet. We're hoping that we get through these meetings and can be sometime prior to the holiday season, after Thanksgiving, but probably that early to mid-December is what we're pushing towards. You know, that's our goal, but as we get that defined, you know, we'll certainly be sending that out to the cities. We'll be publicizing that as far in advance as we can, but right now, hopefully early to mid-December.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. And good evening, gentlemen. Thanks. Good seeing you guys again. Just out of curiosity, you know, the open house is coming up, and you just talked a little bit about it, but community partnership, you know, it's going through a couple community. Are there any community organizations you guys are working with in terms of access, in terms of understanding of the process itself? Can you share with us a little bit more what that looks like?
Yeah, so in phase one, we did some of the, we had kind of I almost call them focus groups, I guess. It was more, so we did a focus group with Century College. We did a focus group with some folks down closer to 3M. We did a focus group kind of with 3M. I know that. There were several of them that we did. And as we move forward, we're looking for opportunities to talk to businesses. And so any of those opportunities that the council might have, and you can relate to Steve, would be great. And we're more than happy to go out there and chat with folks about the project and kind of some of those other opportunities to spread the word.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, but thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Council members, that concludes our agenda tonight. So we will adjourn, and we will be back at our council meeting starting at 7 o'clock.